For most of his life, Daniel believed what he was taught as a child: work hard and success will follow. It was a lesson drilled into him by teachers, parents, and nearly everyone he met. He watched his father wake up before dawn, work long hours in a factory, and return home exhausted, only to repeat the same cycle the next day. Daniel followed this path diligently. He worked harder than anyone he knew, took on extra shifts, sacrificed weekends, and never complained. But as the years passed, something became painfully clear. Working hard wasn't making him rich. In fact, he was barely keeping up. No matter how much effort he put in, he always seemed stuck in the same place. Before we continue, take a moment to type in the comments: "I choose a smarter path to wealth." This small act signals your shift in thinking, opening your mind to a new way of achieving success. And if you find this story valuable, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. One night, after another grueling shift, Daniel sat at his kitchen table, staring at a pile of unpaid bills. He felt like a prisoner in his own life, trapped in an endless cycle of work, exhaustion, and just barely scraping by. If hard work truly led to wealth, he thought, why are the hardest working people often the ones struggling the most? That single question led him on a journey that would change his life forever. Desperate for answers, Daniel reached out to an old friend, Victor. They had grown up in the same neighborhood, sat in the same classrooms, and started life with the same opportunities. But unlike Daniel, Victor had taken a different path. Victor had never seemed to work as hard. In school, he wasn't the best student. He never took on extra shifts or burned himself out chasing overtime. Yet at 40, Victor was financially free. He traveled, invested in businesses, and never seemed to worry about money. Daniel couldn't hold back his curiosity any longer. "How did you do it? What's your secret?" he asked. Victor smirked. "It's not about a secret, Daniel. It's about seeing the game for what it really is." Daniel furrowed his brow. "What do you mean?" Victor leaned back in his chair. "Let me ask you something. If I gave you a shovel and told you to dig a hole for 12 hours a day, would that make you rich?" Daniel chuckled. "Of course not," he said. "Then why do you think working harder at something that doesn't generate wealth will suddenly make you rich?" Daniel sat in stunned silence. He had spent years digging a financial hole instead of building a financial ladder. Victor took a sip of his coffee and continued. "People think wealth is about effort. It's not. It's about what you work on." Daniel listened carefully. "Most people trade their time for money," Victor explained. "But time is limited. You can't get more of it. So if your entire income depends on how many hours you work, you'll always be stuck. That's why rich people don't think in hours. They think in value." "Value?" Daniel repeated. Victor nodded. "Think about this. 2 men put in effort. One digs ditches, the other builds a company. Both work hard, but the first man's effort is limited to his own 2 hands. The second man's decisions impact thousands of people. Who do you think earns more?" Daniel didn't need to answer. He already knew. Wealthy people don't just work. They build. They create things that make money even when they're sleeping. Investments, businesses, assets. They don't just work for money. They make money work for them. Daniel felt like something inside him had shifted. He had been living by the wrong rule book his entire life. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. His whole life he had believed that working harder was the only way. But if that were true, his father, who had worked tirelessly for decades, should have been wealthy. Yet he retired with barely enough to survive. The next morning, Daniel met Victor again. "I get it now," he said. "But what do I do?" Victor smiled. "You stop thinking like a worker and start thinking like an owner." Daniel leaned in. "How?" "First, you have to understand this. Every hour you trade for money is an hour you'll never get back. So you have to build something that pays you over and over again, even when you're not working." "Like what?" Victor pulled out his phone and showed Daniel something. "This is a rental property I own. I don't live there, I don't work there, but every month it makes me money. Same with these investments. I put money in once and they keep paying me. That's how you break free." Daniel realized he had spent years focusing on earning more per hour instead of building income that didn't require his time. "You don't need to be rich to start," Victor continued. "But you do need to start thinking differently. The moment you start looking for ways to make money beyond your own effort, you've already won half the battle." For the first time in his life, Daniel understood. This wasn't about luck. It wasn't about talent. It was about learning the game that wealthy people played, and playing it himself. And so, Daniel made a decision that day. He would stop digging and start building. Daniel knew that understanding the truth wasn't enough. Most people hear life-changing advice, nod in agreement, and then go back to their old ways. He refused to be one of them. He started small. At first, he set aside a tiny portion of his paycheck, just enough to buy a book on investing. He devoured every page, realizing how little he actually knew about money. It was humbling, but it was also exciting. For the first time, he felt like he had control over his financial future. Victor had told him, "The wealthy don't work for money. They make money work for them." And Daniel was finally starting to see what that meant. At work, nothing changed. He still showed up, still worked hard, but inside he was different. He had a plan. Instead of spending his entire paycheck like before, he set aside a percentage every month. It wasn't a lot at first, but Victor had assured him, wealth isn't about how much you make, it's about how much you keep and how well you use it. Daniel learned discipline. When his co-workers spent their raises on new cars and expensive nights out, he stayed focused. Not because he couldn't afford it, but because he had bigger goals. His first investment was small, a few stocks in a company he believed in. At first, nothing happened. Then, slowly, his money started making money. The first time he earned money from something other than his job, it felt like unlocking a secret door he was never supposed to find. And that's when he realized something even more powerful. The world isn't built for hard workers, it's built for owners. One evening, after nearly a year of saving and learning, Daniel called Victor. "I think I'm ready," he said. Victor didn't need to ask what he meant. He could hear it in his voice. "Then let's do it," Victor replied. They met the next day. Victor introduced Daniel to a real estate opportunity, a small rental property that could generate income. It wasn't flashy and it wasn't cheap, but it was a step toward financial freedom. Daniel hesitated. It was his first real investment, and fear crept in. "What if it doesn't work?" he asked. Victor smiled. "What if it does?" Daniel took the leap, and from that moment on, his life was never the same. The invisible trap. Most people never escape. Years later, Daniel looked back and realized something painful. Most of the people he knew were still stuck in the same cycle. His old co-workers, still trading time for money, still waiting for a raise that would never be enough. His family, still working harder every year with no way out. Even some of his friends, still believing that one day their effort alone would make them wealthy. They never saw the invisible trap. They never questioned the lie that hard work alone would save them. But Daniel did, and that single decision, to stop digging and start building, changed everything. Daniel's journey wasn't easy. There were setbacks, failures, moments of doubt, but through it all, he never went back to his old way of thinking, because now he understood. Wealth isn't about working harder, it's about working smarter. Money flows to those who build systems, not just those who work within them. Your financial future isn't determined by effort alone, but by what you choose to focus on. The hardest working people in the world often struggle the most. Not because they lack dedication, but because they were never taught how wealth really works. But you? Now you know. And the only question left is, what will you do with this knowledge? Now, I have a question for you. What's the first action you will take today to start building your path to financial freedom? Take a moment to type, "I choose a smarter path to wealth," in the comments below. This simple act is a commitment, a signal to yourself that you are stepping out of the old cycle and into a new future. If you found this story valuable, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Because the truth is, wealth isn't waiting for you, it's waiting for you to claim it.